Open up a sperm whale's skull and you'll find a brain nearly 5 times heavier than yours. An elephant's brain outweighs a human's by almost 3 times. Even a dolphin is carrying more raw brain mass than you are right now. And yet none of them have ever built a city, split an atom, or written a single sentence. So if bigger brains were the whole story, we'd be the ones getting outsmarted. Something else is going on in there. For most of the 20th century, scientists leaned on a simple ratio to explain human intelligence. It's called the encephalization quotient, basically brain size compared to body size. Humans score high. Dolphins score high. Mice, weirdly, score higher than cows. The problem is this ratio breaks down constantly. Shrews have one of the highest brain-to-body ratios of any mammal on Earth, and they spend their lives eating bugs and running from owls. Size alone was never going to crack this open. So in the mid-2000s, a Brazilian neuroscientist named Susana Herculano Hausel decided to stop guessing and start counting, not estimating. Counting. Her team developed a method where they dissolved brain tissue into a uniform soup, then measured the density of cell nuclei floating in it. It sounds almost too simple to work, but it let them do something nobody had done before. Get an actual number of neurons in a brain, instead of a rough size comparison. What she found rewired how we think about this question. The human brain holds about 86 billion neurons, and of those, roughly 16 billion sit in the cerebral cortex, the wrinkled outer layer responsible for reasoning, language, and planning. For a primate brain of our size, that's an unusually high number, because most mammals pay a steep energy tax for every extra neuron they pack in. Rodent brains bloat fast and get expensive fast. Primate brains, ours included, found a way around that. We can cram in neurons without the size exploding the way it would in almost any other mammal lineage. But here's where it gets complicated, because neuron count by itself doesn't settle things either. Elephants have more total neurons than we do, about 257 billion, roughly 3 times our count. If raw neuron quantity was the deciding factor, an elephant should be out here negotiating trade deals. It isn't, because almost all of those neurons, over 250 billion of them, are packed into the cerebellum, the part of the brain that handles fine motor control. An elephant needs that kind of processing power to run a trunk with over 40,000 individual muscles. Its cerebral cortex, the part actually doing the thinking, holds a fraction of what ours does. So it's not how many neurons you have. It's where they end up and how densely they're wired to each other. Human cortical neurons are more interconnected than in almost any other species measured so far, forming denser webs of communication per neuron than an elephant or a whale ever manages. We got a processing unit that talks to itself constantly, in ways other brains don't, which raises the obvious question. Why us? Why did evolution wire one species this densely and leave everyone else behind? The first serious answer came from Harvard anthropologist Richard Wrangham, and it starts with something as basic as dinner. Wrangham's cooking hypothesis argues that once early humans started applying heat to food, everything changed. Cooked meat and starches take a fraction of the energy to digest compared to raw. That means less gut tissue was needed to process food, and gut tissue is expensive. The body freed up an enormous energy budget, and the brain, which already eats around 20% of your total calories at rest, was first in line to spend it. Chimpanzees, by comparison, spend nearly half their day chewing raw plant matter just to survive. Cooking didn't just change what we ate, it changed what we could afford to grow. But an available energy budget doesn't force a brain to get smarter. It just makes it possible. Something still had to push it there. And a lot of researchers think that push was other people. Oxford psychologist Robin Dunbar spent years comparing primate species and found something consistent across dozens of them. The bigger a species' social group, the bigger its neocortex tends to be, almost like a direct trade. His theory, known as the social brain hypothesis, argues that tracking relationships is one of the most computationally demanding things a primate brain does. Who's allied with who? Who owes who a favor? Who's climbing the hierarchy and who just got knocked down it? Humans on Dunbar's numbers can comfortably maintain meaningful relationships with around 150 people, a figure now known as Dunbar's number. No other primate comes close to managing a social web that size. Keeping track of 150 shifting relationships all at once, all the time, isn't a small task. It's arguably the single hardest ongoing calculation any brain on this planet performs, and evolution built us a processor dense enough to run it. Even that isn't the full picture, though, because plenty of animals live in large groups without inventing agriculture. Wolves coordinate hunts, Elephants mourn their dead and remember migration routes for decades. Crows recognize individual human faces years after a single bad encounter. Something in the human lineage still had to take that raw social and cognitive horsepower and turn it into something cumulative. That's where developmental psychologist Michael Tomasello's work comes in. Tomasello spent decades comparing how human children and chimpanzees learn, and he found a specific gap that shows up almost immediately. Chimpanzees can imitate. They can solve problems. What they rarely do is teach, in the deliberate, patient, show you exactly how sense that human adults do with children almost instinctively. Tomasello calls the result of this the ratchet effect. Each generation doesn't just repeat what the last one knew. It inherits it, improves it a little, and locks that improvement in place before passing it forward. A chimp population can independently discover how to crack a nut with a rock. It essentially never seems to improve that technique across generations. A human population invents a wheel and within a few thousand years has a combustion engine. That ratchet is arguably the strangest ingredient in this whole story, because it means human intelligence was never just about what's happening inside one's skull. It's distributed, stored in language, in writing, in tools that carry someone else's thinking forward into your hands. You didn't personally discover fire, or agriculture, or antibiotics. You inherited thousands of years of other people's neurons doing the work, and your own brain just had to be wired well enough to receive it. But before wrapping this up as a story about primates specifically, it's worth looking at the one animal that breaks the whole framework entirely. The octopus. Octopuses split from the lineage that led to humans roughly 500 million years ago, before brains as we understand them had even really evolved. There was no shared blueprint to build on, and yet an octopus can navigate mazes, open jars from the inside, recognize individual human faces, and in multiple documented cases, escape a sealed tank overnight and find its way back before staff arrived in the morning. It does all of this with about 500 million neurons, a fraction of what we carry. But here's the detail that unravels everything we just built. Only about a third of those neurons sit in the octopus's central brain. The other 2/3 are distributed out along its 8 arms, each one carrying enough processing power to make decisions independently. Cut an octopus arm off, and for a short window, it can still reach for food on its own, without any signal from the brain at all. It isn't one mind directing a body. It's closer to 8 semi-autonomous minds, loosely coordinated by a ninth. No cooking hypothesis explains that. No social brain theory applies to a famously solitary animal that barely interacts with others of its own kind. Evolution reached intelligence in cephalopods through an architecture that shares almost nothing in common with ours, which means whatever pushed human brains toward density and networking wasn't the only route available. It was just the route we happened to take. So stack it up. Dense, efficient neuron packing that most mammals can't afford. A cooking-driven energy surplus that made growing that density possible. A social world demanding enough to reward every extra bit of processing power. A culture capable of stacking discoveries instead of losing them every generation. And sitting off to the side as a reminder that none of this was inevitable. An animal that arrived at intelligence through a completely different architecture altogether. Each piece answers part of the question. None of them, on their own, fully explains why this particular combination only ever assembled itself in one species out of the tens of millions that have existed on Earth. And that's the honest, slightly uncomfortable answer neuroscience gives right now. We can describe the mechanisms in remarkable detail. We can count the neurons, map the density, trace the energy budget down to the calorie. What we still can't fully explain is why this exact stack of conditions converged on one primate lineage on one planet when every other species with big brains, dense social lives, or long childhoods stopped short of tipping over into whatever it is we became. Maybe the most unsettling part is realizing our brains weren't built to be the biggest, or even the most efficient. An elephant's brain runs its trunk with a precision ours could never match. A crow's brain solves problems with a fraction of the tissue we'd need. An octopus solves them with no central plan at all. We just happen to be the species where density, diet, society, and culture all lined up at once. So the next time you watch a dolphin solve a puzzle, or a crow bend a wire into a hook, remember that intelligence on Earth never had one blueprint. It had dozens of different attempts, scattered across species, each one solving a different problem in a different way.